Dancing with the Shadow, a Jungian bedtime story to the sound of rain. Have you ever been afraid of yourself, not of others, not of the world, but of that silent part that feels what it shouldn't, desires what it can't, and thinks what you've learned to hide, the part you lock away in the darkest room of your mind, hoping it'll starve, but it never dies. It grows. And the more you ignore it, the stronger it becomes. The more you run, the faster it chases you. The more you deny it, the louder it screams in the silence of the night. Tonight, you're going to hear a story told under the rain. A story about a woman who spent her entire life running from herself, fleeing from her own shadow, denying her own nature. And maybe, in this dance, you'll find what you tried to forget, what you call a flaw, but which might be your greatest strength, what you hide from the world, but which might be your deepest truth. She always wanted to be the right kind of woman, the one who smiles even when she wants to cry, the one who comforts even when she wants to push away, the one who says it's all good even when nothing is good, who never complains, even when she has every reason to, who always forgives, even when she shouldn't, who puts others first, second, third, and never includes herself on the list at all. So, every time she felt jealous, she felt ashamed. She swallowed the acidic words that rose in her throat like bile. She turned poison into honey, even though it poisoned her inside. She smiled while her stomach twisted in knots. She said, "Good for you," while her heart bled. Every time she wanted more than she had, she went silent. She told herself it was greed. A good woman doesn't want too much. A good woman is thankful for the little she gets. A good woman is content with crumbs. A good woman has no ambition. Every time she got angry, she apologized too quickly, before she even understood why she was angry, before she even allowed anger to exist, before she granted anger the right to breathe. She called that control, emotional maturity, spiritual growth, emotional intelligence. But deep down, way deep down, where even she dared not look, it was fear, pure and simple. Fear of what she'd been told was ugly. Fear of anger, because good little girls don't get angry. They swallow it and smile. Fear of ego, because enlightened women have no ego. Enlightened women stay humble even when trampled on. Fear of ambition, because ambition is a man's thing, and a woman who wants too much loses what she has. A woman who wants too much gets punished by life. She lived in an invisible prison, built brick by brick, with each no she swallowed, with each yes she said when she wanted to say no, with every forced smile that hurt the muscles in her face, with every hidden tear that burned inside, with every unspoken word that rotted in her throat. And the worst part, she herself was the jailer. She stood guard over the walls. She punished any escape attempts. She was both prisoner and guard, victim and executioner at once. By day, it worked. The mask was perfect. So perfect that sometimes she forgot it was a mask. So convincing she even believed her own lie. People praised her. "You're so kind. You're so patient. You're so evolved. I wish I could be like you." And she would smile, thank them, feel the weight of the role she'd created, the weight of being who she wasn't, the weight of living someone else's life. But at night was different. When the lights went out and silence fell like a heavy cloak, something stirred deep inside, something she couldn't name. something that scared her more than any monster under the bed, something that crawled along the walls of her mind like a living shadow. It was herself, her true self, the one tired of pretending, the one who wanted to scream but only knew how to whisper, the one who wanted to run but only knew how to crawl, the one who wanted to live but only knew how to survive, the one who wanted to be but only knew how to seem. It was the part of her that never slept, that stayed awake in the small hours, counting time, counting lies, tallying the price of not being who she really was. Those nights were long, endless. She lay in bed under the weight of all the words she never said, all the desires she never fulfilled, all the anger she never expressed, all the truths she never lived. It was like having stones on her chest, stones that grew heavier by the day, stones that threatened to crush her lungs, stones that kept her from breathing deeply. She tried meditation, tried yoga, tried therapy, self-help books, positive mantras, forced gratitude, anything that promised peace. But peace never came, because there's no peace in lies. There's no rest in running away, no calm in denial. The war was inside her, and no breathing technique can end a civil war. Then one night, a night unlike any other, she dreamed. But this wasn't an ordinary dream. It was one of those dreams that feels more real than reality itself. The kind you wake from and still smell, taste, feel. The kind that leaves a mark, that changes something fundamental, that opens doors you can't close again. She was in an old ballroom. The walls were a dark crimson velvet, worn by time, with water stains that looked like dried tears. The wooden floor creaked under her bare feet, each board telling a different story. The air was thick, loaded with memories that weren't hers yet felt familiar. The music was slow, hypnotic, as if time itself had decided to dance. A melancholy waltz that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. From the walls, from the floor, from the air, from inside her. Everyone was dancing. Couples spun in perfect sync, as if they were one body in two forms, as if they'd rehearsed that dance for centuries, as if they knew secrets she didn't. Everyone had a partner. Everyone was complete, except her. She stood there, rooted in the middle of the ballroom, dressed in white, a simple dress, almost sheer, revealing more than it concealed, vulnerable like an open wound, exposed like a revealed secret, as alone as she always felt, even when surrounded by people. Dancers passed by her as though she were invisible, as though she didn't exist. And maybe she truly didn't exist. Not like this, not as a half, not as a fragment, not as a walking lie. Time felt different in that place. It might have been minutes, could have been hours, could have been a lifetime, could have been all the unlived lives. She stayed there, unmoving, watching, waiting. But waiting for what? She didn't know. She only sensed something was about to happen. Something that would change everything. Something from which there'd be no return. Something that both terrified and fascinated her in equal measure. It was as if the ballroom breathed. The walls pulsed like a giant heart. The floor vibrated with an ancient energy. It was like being inside a living being, some greater consciousness that knew more about her than she did. And then, from the center of the dance floor, someone beckoned, not with words. Words weren't needed in that place where everything was felt before it was thought. It was a silent summons, but impossible to ignore. like when someone is staring at you in a crowded room and you just know, even without looking, that you're being watched, like hearing your name whispered on the wind, like destiny knocking on your door. She turned her head slowly, afraid of what she'd see, afraid of seeing nothing, afraid of seeing everything. And then she saw her. It was a woman, exactly like her, but stronger, more intense, darker. The same features but sharpened by truth. The same eyes but without the veil of lies. The same body but without a submissive stance. She was her, but more her than she had ever allowed herself to be. Her without filters, without masks, without excuses. The woman wore black, a dress that looked like liquid night, moving as if it had its own life, as though it were stitched from all the nights she'd cried in secret, from all the sleepless midnights, from all the darkness she tried to deny. Her hair was loose, wild, free, dancing with an unseen breeze. Her bare feet touched the floor with the confidence of someone who knows every plank, every crack, every secret. Someone who doesn't fear treading firmly. Someone who doesn't ask permission to exist. She was the shadow she'd avoided her entire life. The one she ran from so she wouldn't have to meet it. The one she denied until she couldn't anymore. The one now standing there, inevitable as dawn, certain as death, real as life itself. The shadow didn't smile. She didn't need to. There was something more powerful than a smile on her face. There was truth, raw and unvarnished. Presence, total and absolute. Wholeness, not the kind you read about in self-help books, but a wild wholeness of someone who embraced her demons and found out they were angels in disguise. She simply stood there, complete in her incompleteness, perfect in her imperfection, divine in her profane humanity. Her arms were open wide, waiting, not to fight, though there were fights pending, not to judge, though judgments were due, not to destroy, though there were things that needed destroying, but to dance, simply dance. It was an invitation, the most terrifying invitation she'd ever received, more frightening than any job offer, more challenging than any marriage proposal, more radical than any major life change, because accepting it meant admitting the shadow existed, that it had always existed, that it had always been part of her, and worse, that maybe, just maybe, the shadow was the most genuine part, the strongest part, the most beautiful. Accepting meant admitting she'd spent her life running from herself, building her entire existence on a lie, that the house of cards could collapse, that everything she thought she was might not be, that everything she thought she wasn't might actually be. She hesitated. Her heart pounded like a war drum. Her hands shook like leaves in a storm. Cold sweat traced down her spine like phantom fingers. Every cell in her body screamed for her to run, to wake up, to return to the safety of the mask, the comfort of the lie, the protection of the cage, the familiar, even if the familiar was misery. But her feet had other ideas. They remembered when she was a child and danced without fear, remembered running barefoot on the grass, remembered what it was like not to fear stepping hard. Her feet wanted to dance. One step, small, timid, trembling, but a step, the first step toward herself, the first step out of prison, the first step into truth. The shadow waited, patient like death, knowing everyone arrives eventually, certain like sunrise that never fails, ancient as time that sees all. There was no rush, only certainty, the certainty that this moment had to happen, that it had always been written, inevitable as life itself. Another step, a bit surer this time, as though her feet were remembering how to walk, as though her body was recalling how to move, as though her soul was recalling how to live. The music changed. It grew deeper, more visceral, as though it came not from instruments, but from the earth's core, as if the universe itself were composing. It wasn't a music you heard just with your ears. You heard it in your bones, in your blood, in each cell that vibrated in response. Another step, then another, and another. Each step a decision, each step a death, each step a birth. The girl who learned to stay silent was dying. The woman who would learn to speak was being born. The one who apologized for existing was dying. The one who would claim her space was being born. The one who was afraid was dying. The one who embodied both fear and courage was being born. And then they touched. It was like touching an electric mirror, like plunging into cold water on a hot night, like breathing for the first time, like dying and being born in the same instant, like finding something you lost so long ago you forgot you lost it, like coming home after a lifetime in exile, like hearing your real name after years answering to someone else's. Skin met skin, light met shadow, lie met truth, and in that meeting sparks flew. Not fairy tale romantic sparks, but sparks of recognition, of remembering. I know you, I am you, we are one. The dance began. It wasn't pretty at first. How could it be? How could it be graceful? The dance between two parts torn apart by force. It was awkward, like a first encounter, painful, like surgery without anesthesia, full of stumbles, like someone learning to walk again. Because how do you dance with what you've spent a lifetime denying? How do you move in harmony with what was always treated as an enemy? How do you hold close what you've always pushed away? How do you love what you've always hated? Each step with the shadow was a reunion with pain, but also with healing. Each spin revealed a new truth, each movement a revolution. She spun, and there was ancient jealousy, the one she felt when her friend got what she wanted, the one she denied and disguised as forced happiness. I'm so happy for you, while inside she wanted to scream, why not me? But now, dancing with the shadow, jealousy showed another face. The shadow made her see. Jealousy wasn't ugly. It was human. It was desire crying out. It was the soul saying, I deserve this too. It was life craving more life. It was proof she was still alive, still wanting, still dreaming. Jealousy was passion misplaced, wasted strength, denied power. She spun again, and buried resentment surfaced. The hurt from that day. Someone said she was too nice, like it was a flaw, like kindness was weakness, like gentleness was foolishness. The hurt from every time her patience was mistaken for permission to abuse, her understanding mistaken for a free pass to disrespect. The shadow showed her that hurt wasn't bitterness. It was the boundary that needed to be there. It was the silent scream of someone who went too far trying to please. It was wisdom trying to be born. It was a teacher saying, never do that again. Hurt was self-love waking up. Another movement, and repressed desire appeared. The desire to shine without apologizing, to be seen without hiding, admired without guilt, desired without shame, to take up space without shrinking, to make noise without covering her mouth, to disturb without caring, to exist in her full magnitude without turning down the volume. The shadow whispered, desire wasn't vanity. It was life longing to live, light longing to shine, truth longing to be revealed, nature longing to bloom. Desire was sacred, fueling the world, creating art, making history, making her human. The dance continued. Hours, days, years. Time didn't exist in that ballroom where past, present and future danced together. Each spin uncovered a new layer, each step a new truth. Anger came. Anger, the most forbidden emotion, the one they label crazy if it comes from a woman, the one that must be tamed, controlled, suppressed, denied. But there, in the dance, anger showed its true face. It wasn't destruction, it was protection. It was love saying this isn't right. It was justice saying you deserve better. It was dignity saying enough. Anger was sacred, a cleansing fire, a sword cutting away what no longer served. It was the mother bear protecting her cub. It was life defending life. Then came ambition. The drive to be more, have more, do more, labeled a sin, unladylike, something that leads to ruin. But the shadow told another story. Ambition was evolution, a seed striving to become a tree, a river yearning for the sea, nature following its course. Ambition was sacred, building worlds, moving mountains, making miracles. Without ambition, we'd still be in caves. Without ambition, she'd be nothing. Then selfishness emerged, the cardinal sin of wanting for yourself, of thinking of yourself, of choosing yourself. But in the dance, selfishness revealed its secret. It wasn't cruelty, it was survival. It was the oxygen mask you put on yourself first on an airplane. It was the self-care that enables you to care for others. The self-love that enables you to love. Sacred selfishness, saying I matter too, I exist too, I deserve too. She stumbled. Tears fell like the rain outside. Tears of pain, relief, recognition. Tears of coming home. They wet the white dress, which now looked like a shroud for who she pretended to be. Each tear was mourning, mourning the little girl who learned too soon to shrink herself, the teenager who discovered being too much was dangerous, the woman who chose to be less so she'd fit into the world. But it was also a baptism. Each tear washed away a lie, revealed a truth, became holy water from her own soul. The shadow cried too, dark tears like ink, tears of one who waited so long, who'd been rejected so often, who survived alone in the dark, who was finally recognized. The tears blended, black and white turning grey, grey turning silver, silver turning to light. But the shadow didn't let her stop. She held on tight when she wanted to fall, led her with the sureness of one who knows the path, spun with her whenever she wanted to give up, because the shadow always knew, always stood by in the dark, guarding everything rejected, protecting what was denied, feeding what was abandoned. The shadow was the guardian, the protector, the keeper of what others tried to destroy, the preserver of the spark they tried to extinguish. Gradually, the dance grew more fluid, the steps more certain, the rhythm more natural. It was like remembering something she'd always known but had forgotten, like coming home after years lost, like finding herself in the most improbable place, her own darkness, like realizing the monster under the bed was her best friend all along, the enemy her greatest ally, the prison a doorway. They spun now as one, no longer fighting but flowing, no longer resisting but surrendering, no longer denying but embracing. The white dress and the black dress merged as they spun, the colors dancing, boundaries dissolving, the impossible happening. Then, in a moment outside time, a second that lasted forever, they stopped. They stood there, face to face, light and shadow, mask and truth, cage and freedom, fear and courage, girl and woman, saint and witch, two sides of the same coin, two faces of the same woman, two truths of the same story. Their eyes locked, and in that meeting there was total recognition. They weren't two. They had never been two. The separation was an illusion. The split was the lie. The conflict was the misunderstanding. They were one pretending to be two, whole pretending to be half, complete pretending to be broken. The shadow smiled, not a polite smile, but a wild one. A grin from someone who knows secrets, who knows her own power, who has no fear of her own fire. A witch's smile, a wolf's smile, a smile of a whole woman, a smile that said, finally, a smile that said, welcome, a smile that said, we've always been one. Then she spoke the only thing that needed saying, not with her voice, but with every fiber of her being, every vibrating cell, every dancing atom. Welcome back. And in that instant, something happened. The boundary between them began to melt like sugar in the rain, like ice in a flame, like lies in the face of truth, like fear in the face of love. The black and white began to swirl, not as opposites but as complements, not as enemies but as long-separated lovers, like yin and yang finally embracing, like day and night meeting at twilight. The fusion wasn't explosive. It was smooth, natural, inevitable, like dawn painting the sky with colors that aren't quite night or day, but something new, something whole, like spring thawing winter, like a river merging with the sea, like what always should have been. She felt the change in every cell. The anger she had so feared was now strength, both sword and shield, a sacred no, the boundary she needed. The jealousy she hid was now clarity about her desires, a treasure map, a compass for her soul. The ambition she'd denied became the fuel for her dreams, her engine, her wings. The wildness she'd tamed was now freedom, dance and song. What made her unique? There was no more fear, only power. The power of being whole, complex, a paradox, human, divine and profane at once. And she knew. Now I am whole. She didn't just know it. She was it, embodied it, a truth made flesh. Consciousness become existence. Every cell sang. Every atom danced, every particle of her being vibrated with truth. She was, fully and simply was, at last. The ballroom began to fade, not as something ending, but something fulfilled. The music grew quiet, leaving eternal echoes. The other couples vanished like smoke, leaving behind a lesson. We all dance with our shadows. We all need this dance. We are all light and darkness seeking twilight. But she was no longer alone. She would never be alone again, because she now carried within her the greatest companion, herself, all of herself. No editing, no filters, no excuses, no shame, no fear, simply being, gloriously so. She woke up. The rain was still falling outside. The room was dark. Everything seemed the same, but nothing was the same, because she wasn't the same. The air entered her lungs differently. Her heart beat to a new rhythm. Her blood flowed with a different energy. Even gravity felt changed, lighter, more real, more true. She rose from bed. Her feet touched the floor with the certainty of someone who knows where she stands. She went to the mirror, and for the first time in a long while, she liked what she saw. Not because she was perfect, but because she was real. Not because she was all light, but because she was also shadow. Not because she was good, but because she was whole. Not because she was saintly, but because she was human. Her reflection smiled, not the polite smile of old, but the wild grin of the shadow, a smile that said, I know, I am, I no longer pretend. She smiled back, a pact, a promise, a commitment never to separate again, never to run, never to deny, only to be, simply to be, fully and completely. The days that followed were different. Not easier, just different. Life wasn't suddenly a fairy tale. It was real life with all its complexity. But now she had tools. She had strength. Now she had herself. When she felt anger, she didn't apologize. She let the anger exist, learned from it, used its energy. She discovered that anger was information, her internal system saying, something is wrong. Her body's wisdom defending her integrity. She learned the difference between destructive anger and sacred anger, between exploding and setting a boundary, between attacking and protecting herself. When she felt envy, she didn't punish herself. She asked what it was trying to show her about her unfulfilled desires. She discovered envy was a teacher, highlighting what she truly wanted, her soul's GPS, pointing the way to her dreams. She learned to turn envy into inspiration, poison into medicine, pain into direction. When she wanted something, she no longer belittled herself for it. She went after it. She discovered that wanting wasn't a sin. It was a blessing, her driving force, what got her out of bed in the morning, what gave life its color. She learned her desires were sacred, her dreams a form of prayer, her ambition divine. People noticed the change. How could they not? She radiated something different, not the artificial glow of pretense, but the real glow of authenticity. Not the forced kindness of fear, but the genuine kindness of choice. Not the phony peace of repression, but the true serenity of wholeness. Some pulled away, those who needed her small to feel big, who fed on her submission, who mistook her kindness for weakness, who feared a woman who's whole, who preferred lies over truth. And that was okay, because she understood. Not everyone is ready for truth. Not everyone wants it. Not everyone can handle it. Others drew closer, those who recognized the shine of someone whole, who didn't fear her strength, who celebrated her complexity, who also danced with their own shadows, who also sought wholeness, who vibrated at the frequency of truth. She found her tribe, her sisterhood, her partners in the dance, women who understood that being a woman isn't just about being light, but about being the moon with all its phases, the sea with all its tides, the earth with its cycles, the fire with its power to transform. She discovered there were others like her, women who had also gone through the dance, found their shadows, chosen wholeness. They formed an invisible sisterhood. They didn't need words to recognize one another, just a look, a smile that came from within, a presence that apologized for nothing, a strength that didn't need to shout. At work, the changes were subtle but profound. She didn't become some fury unleashed. She became a woman who knew her worth. She didn't start stepping on others. She stopped letting people step on her. She wasn't arrogant. She was confident. Anyone who really looked could see the difference. When she presented her ideas, she no longer started with, "I'm sorry, but..." She began with, "I have a proposal." When she disagreed, she didn't say, "Maybe I'm wrong, but..." She said, "I see it differently." When she deserved recognition, she didn't wait around for someone to notice. She asked for it. When she was offered less than fair, she didn't accept crumbs. She negotiated for the feast. She discovered something radical. The world didn't end. The sky didn't fall. People didn't hate her. On the contrary, she was more respected, listened to, valued, because there's something magnetic about someone who knows who they are. Something irresistible about a person who doesn't apologize for existing. Something powerful about someone who dances with their shadow. In her relationships, the transformation was even deeper. She no longer begged for love. She knew she was lovable as she was. She no longer shrank to fit anyone's space. She knew real love wanted her whole. She no longer faked orgasms. She knew her pleasure mattered. She no longer swallowed every injustice. She knew she deserved respect. Some relationships didn't survive. The ones based on her being less so, others could be more. The ones that depended on her silence. The ones that thrived on her smallness. The ones that fed on her light, but feared her shadow. It hurt, but it set her free, clearing space for what was real. She learned to say no. No to invitations she didn't want to accept. No to favors she couldn't do. No to abuse disguised as jokes. No to disrespect disguised as love. She discovered that no is a complete sentence. It needs no justification, no explanation. Her no was sacred. She learned to say yes. Yes to what brought her pleasure, gave her joy, made sense, honored her soul. She realized her yes only had value if her no was respected. That a yes without the possibility of no was just another prison. That a true yes comes from choice, not fear. Guilt still showed up. An old companion, not easily dismissed. It appeared when she put herself first, looked after her own well-being, refused to fix everyone else's problems, allowed herself to exist at full volume. But now she understood guilt. She knew it was just the echo of the old prison, the ghost of the woman she was, the voice of those who liked her small. She learned how to talk to guilt, to thank it for protecting her when she didn't know how to protect herself, but also to say she no longer needed it, that she had other tools now, that she could tell the difference between being good and being a doormat, between being kind and being a pushover, between helping and sacrificing herself. Guilt lost its power, became a whisper, then silence. Her sex life changed completely. She discovered she had desires, valid, sacred desires, that the body she denied was a temple of pleasure, that the lust she feared was vital energy, that the passion she hid was creative force. She learned to ask for what she wanted, show what she liked, explore without shame, and climax without guilt. She discovered the shadow also lived in her sexuality, in the woman who wanted to be taken, who wanted to dominate, who had fantasies, who wasn't always gentle, who was sometimes wild, and that was okay. It was all part of her, all sacred, all part of the dance. Her creativity exploded. Of course it did. Creativity is shadow dancing with light, chaos turning into order, the dark becoming art. With the shadow integrated, she had access to her full creative arsenal, ideas from the underground of the soul, inspirations born in the dark, creations that needed all of her to exist. She began to write, not the polite, restrained pieces of before, but texts with blood and guts, words that startled and enchanted, that came from where light alone can't reach, that only someone who had danced with her shadow could produce. True writing. She started painting, not the delicate watercolors of before, but explosions of color and darkness, canvases that screamed and whispered secrets, that revealed the invisible, exposed what was hidden. Art that only comes from someone who knows her demons and has embraced her monsters, discovering they were angels in disguise. Her spirituality changed too. She didn't need to be saintly. She could be witchy. She didn't need to be pure. She could be whole. She didn't have to deny her body to find her soul. She discovered the divine also dwells in the shadows, that God also dances in the dark, that the sacred includes the profane, that there is no separation. She formed a new relationship with the divine, not based on fear or guilt, but on love and freedom. No longer trying to be perfect to earn God's love, but knowing she was loved despite imperfection. No longer denying her humanity to reach heaven, but finding heaven in her fully lived humanity. She discovered the dark goddess, the feminine face of the divine hidden by patriarchal religion. Lilith, who wouldn't submit. Kali, who destroys to create. Hecate, lady of crossroads. Morrigan, queen of war. She found out there was divinity in destruction too, holiness in wildness, sacredness in shadow. She created her own rituals, new moon rituals when darkness is complete, rituals to honor anger, celebrate desire, consecrate ambition, sanctify what's forbidden. Rituals that included all of her, leaving nothing out, treating each part as sacred. Her relationship with her body changed. It was no longer a battlefield, it was home. No longer an enemy to be subdued, but an ally to be honored. Every curve she once hated was sacred landscape. Every mark she once hid was a map of her story. Every imperfection she once tried to fix was a signature of her humanity. She danced, not the restrained dance of old, but the dance of someone who has fire in her belly, earth in her feet, water in her hips, and air in her arms. She danced her wildness, her sensuality, her divinity, her humanity, shadow and light in an infinite spiral. She learned to eat with pleasure, not guilt, to sleep without remorse, to rest without justification, to care for herself without asking permission. She discovered the body she once punished was the stage where shadow and light meet, the altar where the sacred appears. Her friendships deepened, not all, but the ones that mattered, the ones that survived her transformation and celebrated her wholeness. Those connections became more real, more raw, more true. They could talk about light and shadow, about saint and profane, about fear and courage. They could be whole together. She discovered the power of true vulnerability, not the performative kind that makes you look like a victim, but the courageous vulnerability of showing your shadows, confessing fears, revealing desires, with no shame of being human. She saw that vulnerability forge deep connections, bridges between souls, bonds that don't break. With her family, it was complicated. Family is where we first learn masks, where shadow is first denied, where we're taught love is conditional, that to be loved, we must act a certain way, that some parts of us are acceptable and others not. Some relatives didn't understand the change and wanted the old version of her back, the one who didn't confront or question, who kept the peace at any cost, who swallowed everything with a smile. They felt uneasy with her new voice, her new boundaries, her refusal to sacrifice her truth for false harmony. But others, surprisingly, were inspired. They saw in her the permission they needed, the courage they sought, the possibility of being whole as well. Some difficult conversations happened. Old truths came out. Old wounds were exposed to heal. Masks fell off. And in the space created, more genuine relationships grew. She learned that family isn't just blood, it's choice. It's who celebrates your wholeness, who dances with you, who doesn't fear your shadows because they know their own. She created a chosen family of souls, vibrating on the same wavelength, hearts beating in the same rhythm, people dancing the same dance. Money took on a new meaning. It wasn't a symbol of greed anymore, but a tool for freedom. Not a source of shame, but a sacred resource. She learned to charge what she was worth, to have no shame in seeking abundance, to view money as energy, energy she deserved to have flow her way. She stopped working for free, stopped giving out needless discounts, stopped apologizing for her rates, stopped belittling herself financially. She discovered that charging fairly honored her work, her energy, and taught others to value it too. It was part of the dance of light and shadow, of give and receive, of serving and being served. Her relationship with time changed. It wasn't an enemy racing against her anymore, but an ally dancing with her. Each life stage had its beauty, each age its wisdom. The wrinkles beginning to show weren't flaws, they were maps, stories written on her skin, proof of a life well lived. She understood cycles, times of light and times of shadow, expansion and withdrawal, giving and receiving, speaking and silence. And all were sacred, all were needed, all part of the dance. The internal seasons made sense. Her soul's winter, when she needed to go inward. Her spring, when she was ready to bloom. Her summer, when she shone in her fullness. Her autumn, when she needed to let go. She learned to honor each season, not force a springtime in the dead of winter, not cling to summer when autumn called. Her intuition grew stronger, of course. It's the voice of the shadow, knowledge arising from the dark, wisdom beyond the mind. With the shadow integrated, the channel was open. Messages arrived clearly, insights appeared out of nowhere, and synchronicities multiplied. She learned to trust that voice, especially when it defied logic, because logic is limited. It only sees the surface, while intuition sees beneath, sees in the shadows, sees what's invisible, sees what's yet to be. She developed practices to honor intuition, meditations in the dark, journeys into her inner underworld, conversations with the shadowy parts, new moon rituals, anything that connected her to the mystery, the unknown, the deep feminine that knows without knowing how. Her dreams became more vivid, her dialogue with the unconscious more fluid. It was as though the ballroom dance had opened a portal, a permanent channel between worlds, conscious and unconscious, light and shadow, the known and the mysterious. She began writing down her dreams, studying their symbols, learning their language. She found that dreams were letters from the shadow, messages from the deeper self, guidance from her soul, treasure maps within, guides on the journey of individuation. Her relationship with death changed. It was no longer the ultimate terror, but the ultimate dance, the final integration, the final embrace of light and shadow. She realized small deaths happen constantly. Every time an old version of us dies, every time a mask falls away, every time an ego dissolves, and it was necessary, it was sacred, part of life. She made peace with her mortality. She understood that life's urgency came from knowing she would die, that life's beauty came from its impermanence, that every moment was precious because it wasn't forever, that death wasn't the enemy, but a teacher, one that taught her how to live. Legacy became important, not the legacy of appearing perfect, but of being real, not of never making mistakes, but of learning from them, not of being all light, but of dancing with her shadows, the legacy of wholeness, of truly living, truly loving, leaving an authentic mark on the world. She started mentoring other women, not to teach them to be like her, but to guide them in being themselves, sharing her journey, showing her scars, revealing her fears, celebrating her victories, being a beacon, not by being perfect, but by being real. Every woman who discovered her own shadow was a triumph. Every woman who began her own dance was a celebration. Every woman who became whole was a revolution, because whole women changed the world, not by being flawless, but by being real, not by being saintly, but by being complete. She realized the journey never ends. There will always be new layers, new shadows, new dances, because individuation isn't a destination, it's a lifelong path. Wholeness isn't a permanent state, it's a daily practice. The dance never stops, it just flows more smoothly. And that was perfectly fine, better than fine, because the dance is life itself, and she was finally alive, no longer just surviving, living with all the colors, flavors, textures, temperatures, light and shadow, saint and sinner, human and divine. That old ballroom still exists within her. Whenever she needs to, she can go back. The shadow is still there, but no longer a stranger. Her partner, her lover, the other side of the coin. Sometimes they waltz, sometimes they tango, sometimes they dance wildly without a name, but they always dance. And with each dance, she becomes more herself, more whole, more true, more powerful, more human, more divine, more everything she always was, but was afraid to be. The rain keeps falling, just like that night, like every night of transformation. Rain that washes, purifies, fertilizes, bringing new life. Rain that is the sky's tears, blessings in disguise, the music of the soul's background. And somewhere, right now, another woman is dreaming, stepping into the old ballroom, seeing her shadow, trembling with fear, thinking about running away. But something in her knows, something in her remembers, something in her recognizes the call, and maybe, just maybe, she'll accept the invitation. She'll join the dance. She'll discover that the monster is an angel, that the enemy is an ally, that shadow is light from another angle, that she was born whole and can be whole again. What this woman learned, you can learn too. What you silence will scream inside you. What you deny will take its revenge. And the shadow doesn't want to destroy you. It only wants to dance. It wants to return your stolen power, your buried truth, your tamed wildness, your extinguished passion, your controlled fire. It wants to give you back you. But only if you accept the invitation. Only if you join the dance. Only if you have the courage to face the dark mirror, to embrace what you denied, to love what you hated, to be what you've always been. The shadow waits, patient as ever, in the crimson velvet ballroom, arms open, a wild smile, promising wholeness, certain you'll come someday. Because deep down, you know, you were born for this dance. You were born whole, and whole you shall be again. When you're ready, she'll be there. When fear turns to courage, when suffering becomes too great, when the mask grows too heavy, when the lie becomes too exhausting, she'll be there. And then you'll dance. And at the end of it, you'll know what she already knows. Now you're whole. Because a danced shadow becomes strength, and you are stronger than you imagine, waiting in the dark, calling your name, ready to dance. The rain goes on, the night goes on, life goes on. But now you know, there is light in the dark, there is power in the shadow, there is courage in the fear, and within you, there is everything. Everything you need, everything you've always been, everything you're ready to become. The dance awaits, the shadow awaits, wholeness awaits. And you, what are you waiting for?